Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition is a special. We're joined by someone who's a good friend of our broadcast, Dr. William Seraile, Professor Emeritus of African and African American Studies at Lehman College. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is the Abolition Commemoration, particularly the abolition of slavery in New York State. I know that there's a lot of focus over the last 2 to 3 years over on Juneteenth, which is recognizing the ending of slavery in Texas. But the reality is, in New York State, we too have had, people don't realize that New York had slavery, and the fact that there was a date that was where our slavery initially ended, and there was a whole process. So for those who are not familiar with that, and the date being 1826, can you give us a little backdrop into what led to the ending of slavery in New York?
And certainly. Slavery was in New York State as it was throughout the other colonies in the 18th century. The difference was that New York State was second to Charleston, New York City, in terms of importing Africans. During this time period, the Revolutionary War, there was a movement to abolish slavery, which did occur in New England. So Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and other New England states abolished slavery in the 1780s. New York State, you had people, some were Quakers, some were Methodists, and those religious bodies became anti-slavery. Quakers said you cannot be a Quaker and also be a slave owner. And the Methodist Church later on actually split between the North and the South over the question of slavery. In New York, in 1785, you had an organization called the New York Manumission Society, composed of very wealthy people. Many were politicians, people such as John Jay, who became Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Governor Morris, who was a legislator, Alexander Hamilton, and Aaron Burr, and many other people. Many of them were slave owners, which is a contradiction that they wanted to abolish slavery. But they didn't abolish it immediately. The plan was to do it in a gradual manner. So from 1785 down to 1799, they were working with this issue. And in 1799, they said anyone who was born after July 4th as a male would serve for 28 years, and women would serve for 25 years. So that meant by July 4th, 1827, they did enact what became known as the Emancipation of Slavery in New York State. That gave freedom to approximately about 10,000 people. But also what's important about the New York Manumission Society was in 1787, they established what became known as the African Free Schools. The African Free Schools were in Manhattan, and they educated some of the most important leaders at that time. People such as Henry Highland Garnett, who was born into slavery in the South, but managed to get out and became very active in New York. He was a Presbyterian minister. Later on became one who spoke out against slavery, and in 1843, he called for slaves to rebel. He said, go to your master and demand your freedom, and they tell you no, then rebel and kill if necessary. So here are people who were educated in the color schools established by the Manumission Society. Now, many of these members, as I said before, were very important men, and they also, through their wives and daughters, established not only the Color Orphan Asylum, but also they established like the Old Folks Home for colored citizens, and ones who tried to engage in ending some of the segregation that existed in the state of New York at that time. During this time period in 1827, we have Freedom's Journal. established by Samuel Carnish and John Russwurm. And these two men, in the very first editorial, they said, "For too long, others have spoken for us." And they decided that they needed to speak about themselves because they said the white press, which is still true today, wanted to play up too much the violence in the community, wanted to talk about the evilness of the community, and did not want to talk about the progress nor the hope and aims of that community. So if we look back, I guess the big question would be, why were slave owners in the Manumission Society interested in abolishing slavery? And I think the answer is, during this time period in Europe, you had France and England both began to organize anti-slavery organizations, and there was a big movement towards emancipation. And it might have occurred gradually throughout the whole country, but except you had the invention in 1793 of the cotton engine, or the cotton gin, that made it very quickly easier to remove the cotton from the seed. If you ever see cotton, it looks like a cotton ball, but there's a seed, and it was very slow to do this by hand, but the machine could do it rather quickly.
Dr. Seraile, can you tell us about the role of the church towards the abolition of enslavement in New York?
As I said before, you had Quakers and Methodists. White churches were very active in trying to bring about emancipation, but also the black church. For example, like Mother AME Zion, Abyssinian Baptist Church, and others were very active during this period, even before officially ending slavery, agitating through the churches, organizing the people for petitions against slavery. Once emancipation came in New York State, the church was very active in trying to keep congregations together in terms of material needs, food, clothing, things of that nature. So the churches would every year have celebrations. Even they had demonstrations and marches to show that they were in accord with emancipation. Do understand at this time there's a great deal of discrimination in the city and state of New York. Discrimination in housing, education, public accommodations, and many times the churches would step in to help people who needed whatever they needed at that moment, whether it was housing, education, like after school, evening education, and certainly the religious instructions.
So you mentioned about the role of the church and how the church played in terms of advocating for abolition, as well as responding to celebrating it, right? Celebrating it. Now, as we move forward into today, as you know, we're both aware of a woman by the name of Mrs. Bessie Jackson, who several years ago had began the process of having annual breakfasts recognizing the abolition of slavery in New York. And recently, over the last couple of years, she has gotten legislators in New York State to petition, and successfully did that, to advocate for this date to be a holiday. And right now we have this date as a holiday, and we want to make sure we play some footage of one of our instructors, our legislators recognizing this date.
Two important dates in African American history. The first is legislation by Assemblymember Gary Pretlow that recognizes the Abolition Commemoration Day, which will be the second Monday in July. It commemorates the Abolition Act, which ended slavery in New York State. It passed the legislature March 31st, 1817, and abolished slavery effective July 4th, 1827. Slavery is often too remembered as a legacy of the South, but New York has its own dark history with the institution. At one point, 20% of New York City's population were slaves. Abolition Commemoration Day also honors New York's abolitionist history. Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, Frederick Douglass and the North Star, published in Rochester, Freedom's Journal, the first African American newspaper published in the U.S. by John Russell and Samuel Cornish. And I also want to give a particular shout out to Miss Bessie Jackson. She is the director of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, a longtime public school teacher, a constituent of mine who was 94 years young, who has fought for years to make this a reality. She first came to me with this passionate advocacy in 2004. So I know Ms. Jackson is watching, and I hope she feels that the work that she has put in for the last 16 years has come to fruition. And it's to ensure that the full, uncompromised history of our state is taught and remembered.
So when you think about it, and you think about how important it is for us to recognize our history, and to even for New Yorkers to know that this history is really embraces us all, regardless of color, that it's the acknowledgement of African people in New York State and the roles and the work that was done to support the abolition, it became very key. And so that's why our next guest will talk about her role in ensuring that this important holiday is recognized throughout the state and throughout the nation. On this edition is a special, as we're joined by the New York State Director of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, Mrs. Bessie Jackson. Welcome to Cultural Caravan.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Let me just start, Mrs. Jackson. Tell us a bit about your role with this movement. You were the New York State Director. What is some of the, first of all, give us briefly a role of what is the role of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, also known as ASALH?
Well, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History was started in 1915 by Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And the purpose of it was to teach the importance of the history of African American people, because very little was said about African American people during that time. And there were people who thought that we, as a group of people, had done very little or nothing in terms of history. And Dr. Woodson knew that much had been done, and he wanted to put it in the history books and to tell the story in school and other places. So he organized this association in 1915. And all over the United States, different groups decided to organize special groups in the area and talk about the same thing. Now, I have been a member of this organization since 1966. And so now, of course, I am the New York State Director, and I realized that we had to do more than just learn ourselves. We had to make a difference. Just learning and talking about what you've learned is not enough, even though it helps. But you have to show where what you have learned is going to make a difference in your life or in the lives of others. And so that's what we are trying to do now. We're trying to make a difference Education is very important, and we are all concerned about education. When I say we, I am talking about the organization. And the name of the organization now is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. When it was first organized, it was organized as the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. But we've moved up since then, and we know that we are African Americans, and we know that we are talking about the history of African American people. So that's what we are doing. But we started thinking about what we could do that we were not doing. And we knew that at one time there were slaves in New York. But we had been told that there had not been slaves in New York. And I mean, we were told that by educators. We were told that the slaves were only in the South. There were no slaves in New York. Well, we knew better. So we decided to begin talking about that, but just talking about it, as I said, was not enough. We had to do something about it. So one of the things we decided to do was to at least begin to celebrate the abolition of slavery in New York. So we started that in 2004. We started celebrating the abolition of slavery in New York State. Then we did it annually. And in 2006, we decided that we started saying, well, there were slaves. So how did they become free? What did they do? And these were our ancestors. So we started thinking about our ancestors. And one of the things that our ancestors did first was, no matter where they were, in church or any other place where they gathered in numbers, they prayed. So we decided we must pray. And they sang. And of course, we must sing. So we started then having a prayer breakfast. And we had that annually, starting from 2006 until even now. We still have an annual prayer breakfast.
Now, when you first decided that this is a date, this date in our history needed to be acknowledged and recognized, did everyone agree with you? Did you have some resistance?
Oh, everybody agreed because we talked about it we started the conversation at our meetings. So we were all members or visiting, and of course everybody was happy.
So people basically began to really expect that something was going to happen around this time.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Then we decided that, this should be a holiday. And of course, a holiday has to have a name. It has to have a reason. Okay? And so we decided that the holiday should be done in commemoration of the abolition of slavery in New York State.
If I understand correctly, because normally it would be on July 4th, it's now officially the second second Monday of July, correct?
Yes. our first few years were celebrated on the 4th of July. And I wanted it to be on the 4th of July, and there were people who said, but there are so many people who have picnics, family gathering. You're not going to have the audience that you would like to have on that day. So maybe we should find another date to celebrate. So I had to end up agreeing with them. And so I said, well, it should be as close to the 4th of July as we can make it. And then we thought about it and realized that we had to make sure we didn't schedule it on a date that would become a Saturday or a Sunday at some years. So we decided that we would have it on a certain day. And we know that Monday will never become Sunday, so neither will it become Saturday. So, okay, we'll have it on a Monday. And we want to make sure it never becomes Monday the 4th. So we will schedule it for the second Monday in July.
What suggestions do you have in terms of how people should celebrate Abolition Commemoration Day in New York State?
Well, there are many ways of celebrating. One thing I want people to do is to understand the importance of the holiday. And yes, understand that it is a state holiday. And if you are a citizen of New York State, I would expect you to be happy that New York State has a holiday, because it never had a holiday before. That's one thing. It never had a holiday before. Another thing is that it is the manner in which you go out to celebrate something that you care about. If you are a New Yorker, then don't you care about improving New York? So this to me is important. Yes, this is a civic holiday, and that's what the people need to understand. If it's a civic holiday, then it doesn't make any difference how old you are. You can do something. It makes no difference how young you are. You can do something. You can say, if you care about a day like Christmas, and Christmas is a religious holiday, but we celebrate it in New York State, we certainly should celebrate New York State's holiday in New York State.
So we really want to say to you, we thank you for your commitment to our history and culture, and really making it plain and giving us something to celebrate in respect to our living here in New York State. And please, can you close out with the importance of history for those young people sitting in the audience who are trying to understand, why is this so important? Can you tell us in your words why is this so important for us?
Well, we all have to live somewhere. And we are all living in a state. We need to feel that it's our state. It's our responsibility to show the beauty of our state, and where it's not beautiful, show that it is our responsibility to make it beautiful, so that when we leave it more beautifully than we found it.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. Until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you.
Onipa Abusia and Denizulu Cultural Arts Institute presents the 56th annual Ojera Akan New Year celebration, Saturday, October 26th, from 7 p.m. to midnight at Occasions Banquet and Catering Hall, 127-08, Merrick Boulevard, New York. Call 347-454-9026 for more information.